tools for our task, our panel for the day, evening, wherever you are. This this panel is this panel will be the four of us, Dana, Erika, myself, Zhui, Ning, and Somto speaking. Nisi is here to more or less observe if you can see Nisi. And we'll be running for 1.5 hours from now. You can pop questions and comments in the chat at any time. Questions will be fed back to us, and we'll do a short Q&A at the end, but you can send your questions in whenever. And SFWA tech support is here if you have any issues hearing any of us. This panel is being recorded, so all participants will be available on video. Your comments will not be seen unless your comments will not be seen, but your questions, if you want your name to be seen on them, just have it at the end when you ask us stuff. And that's pretty much it that I have for housekeeping to begin with. So just before we get on to intros, I'm going to gonna ask Nisi to give a very brief introduction of Publishing Taught Me as an anthology and as a project, and then we'll kick off.
Okay, well, Publishing Taught Me was proposed to me as an online anthology that would explore and sort of give people an idea of the state of science fiction, fantasy, and horror publishing with regard to the experiences of people of color, what we call the global majority. So I was asked to find these two great interns, Somto and Zhui Ning. I was asked to solicit a bunch of essays, and the results are up on the SFWA website if anyone wants to check them out. They're stunning, they're fabulous, they're stirring and thought-provoking, and they're there.
Thanks, Nisi. So as Nisi has already mentioned, this essentially the panel this is the panel today, and another panel next week will wrap up the anthology project. Here we have featuring two of the panel contributors. We'll do a quick introduction all around. So if each person can just give a quick intro of yourself, your name, pronouns, what you do in publishing, and how you sort of came to that particular role. And we'll go in a circle from Erika.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erika Hardison. I am a journalist, a cultural journalist. How I got into publishing. Okay. Around 2015, 2016, I was writing pop culture entertainment articles for Huffington Post and AOL. And I started to hyper focus on diversity in comics, specifically. This is before like the boom of like Luke Cage on Netflix. And I was already a serious and dedicated reader. So that slowly evolved into covering books in publishing. And then I started to become a contributor for Book Riot. And I wrote a lot of reviews and lists and essays as it regards to diversity in science fiction, Afrofuturism, just general fiction. And then that opened up an opportunity to create content for websites like USA Review Today, and I became a Publisher Weekly reviewer, which I am doing currently, where I review diverse young adult, middle grade titles, and I also was a book curator for Steph Curry's book club. I was able to solidify and have him talk about Afrofuturism, which was a big thing for me because a lot of people don't have that influence directly with celebrities to talk about diversity in publishing, let alone Afrofuturism. So that brought me here. I saw the call for, essays for Publishing Taught Me. And since I've been in publishing, I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot, and hopefully I would like to think of myself as a disruptor in publishing.
Thanks, Erika. And Diana?
Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Pho. My pronouns are she and her. I've been in publishing for over 15 years, and I'm actually excited to mention the news just dropped this morning that I received a promotion to be editorial director of Erewhon Books. So especially pleased to share this news live with everyone. But to start a little bit about my journey, I actually started off in international sales and marketing. I worked at Hachette, which is another what we call Big Five publishing house here in the United States. And from there, I moved to the science fiction book club because in my heart of hearts, I always wanted to be a sci-fi editor. Worked there for a time. And around the same time, I also had a blog about multicultural steampunk called Beyond Victoriana. And it was because of that blog that, Liz Gorinsky, who at the time was an editor at Tor Books, reached out and said, hey, I really love your blog. We're starting up a new website. It's called Tor.com. Would you like to blog about steampunk for us? And I was like, yes. So I was a blogger and a little bit of a social media manager for Tor.com and all their steampunk content for a while, as well as like working for the science fiction book club. I actually took a break from publishing, got my master's in performance studies. And then when I came back to the field, there was a spot in editorial open, at Tor. And luckily they had picked me to be part of their team. I worked in editorial with them for almost 10 years. And then I had another tangent, worked in podcasts during the core of the pandemic period at this company called Realm Media that specialized in genre, long form audio dramas. But the books called back to me again. I was asked to come on board the team at Erewhon, which again is a house that was originally founded by Liz. But staff shifts have changed since then. And now I'm pretty happy. I'm going to be celebrating my second anniversary at Erewhon, which feels wild because it's been a long journey to get to where I am now, and super excited to see what's to come.
I've never heard your origin story before. That's really interesting. Also, really resonating from the other end, because I did my master's in drama as well, and had a long circle back around for publishing. Somto?
Hi everyone, my name is Somto Ihezue. My pronouns are he, him. I am an assistant editorial intern for the Publishing Taught Me anthology, brought aboard by Nisi Shawl and working alongside Zhui and Chang. I am a student, an MFA student at the University of Maryland, studying fiction. I'm also a writer and now working with Nisi and Zhui in the capacity of an editor, which has been great so far. Yeah.
Somto is a brilliant writer who has been published in a lot of places. I don't know why he didn't mention any of those credits, but he is, so you should read his work. And just to wrap that up, for myself, like Somto said, my name is Zhui Ning Chang. My pronouns are she, they. I've been working with Nisi and Somto over the last year on the Publishing Taught Me anthology. Outside of that, I'm also a freelance editor, writer, and theater maker. I'm the editor-in-chief at Choreo Magazine, which is a magazine for speculative fiction and works from immigrant diaspora writers, publishing both works in English as well as in translation. And I'm also a PhD researcher in Southeast Asian speculative fiction of the last decade or so. And that's us for introductions. Somto, yeah, take the next question.
Yes. I would like to, Erika, if you're up for a question.
Sure.
So, your work really referenced a lot of, yes, we need diverse books, but we also need diverse reviewers still. and it really reflects a lot of key moments in the industry, or events that have happened in the industry, in the publishing industry over time. And I was curious how like all these events or have shaped your understanding of the publishing industry over time, and how those same events have shaped your own perspective as well.
That's a good question. Well, one of the things that stuck out to me when I started reviewing more books, for trade publication especially, is that there's so much cultural nuances that get missed when you don't have diverse readers. It really became a shock to me. I think when I interviewed one author who was very determined to find an editor of color for their book because they were scared that if they presented their book as is to someone who was not culturally competent, a lot of nuances in their story will really get followed down through editing. And that was not the first time I've heard that. And being able to review books written by non-white authors or even non-American authors, even though I am American, there's always a lot of relatability from people from different countries who speak different languages. There's always something I can like see and relate to, even though it's not my mirrored experience, right? I could relate to people from different countries with oppression. I could relate to, different people, marginalized genders who are fighting patriarchy, right? And not saying that people that can't relate to it, but it's just it's a difference. And when you don't have a certain cultural competency and you're reviewing literature, a lot of things fall by the wayside. So that was one of the first things I noticed. And when I say we need book reviewers too, it doesn't just mean reviewers. It also means editors. It also means people in marketing. It also means, publishing assistants. It means everyone across the board. Because if you have diverse books, but you don't have the diverse people to market it, you don't have the diverse people to edit it, you don't have the diverse people to put together, publicity behind it, you're not really fulfilling the need of diversity, right? You're just putting diverse people in certain sections, but you're not really planning it all the way out. And being able to be in publishing, it really bothers me a lot that, publishing, the big five especially, will say, hey, we published, 5% of diverse voices. But if your staff is still 80, 90% non-diverse, are you really pushing the needle? And so that's pretty what my perspective is and how it shapes it. And it just made me advocate more for diverse books. I tell publishers, give me all your diverse titles, let me read them. Unfortunately, in 2024, it's not like it was a couple years ago. A couple years ago, everyone wanted to read more diversely and take pictures of it and put their little black squares on social media. Unfortunately, now it's not the same landscape, at least from what I have observed. The diversity, especially with non-diverse reviewers, they're not reviewing diverse books. I can go to a website like, let's say, Paste Magazine and look at their fantasy list, and it'll just be all white authors. And it's like it just mirrors TikTok, and that's another rant. But it's really up to the reviewers and the publishers and the people who operate book lists to enforce diversity. Some platforms do it. There are some platforms I've written for that require at least 40% of book lists to be diverse, but that's not the standard for everywhere across media, unfortunately.
You say at least 1%. Is that the number?
Well, for some platforms I've written for, they will say if you submit a book list, it has to be at least 40% of marginalized authors on the list. But again, that's not the standard for every platform. There's only a few that do that, and it's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Diana, do you want to weigh in from the other end of seeing how the landscape has changed?
Say that one more time.
Hmm?
Can you
Sorry,
repeat that? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Can you repeat that?
No, I wanted to ask if Diana wanted to weigh in from the other end of like the publishing process on how the landscape has changed or not, as it may be.
You know, I think when I think about changes, I always think about how it comes in cycles. You know, especially in terms of representation and inclusion. And the cycle, and totally my grain of salt, usually happens is that there's some sort of norm, it's not perfect or great, and then something big happens, something you know that causes a lot of controversy or backlash or something. You know, and then in response to this event, people try to make a lot of changes or adjustments or progress. But then the final step is there's pushback against that change or progress. So I always think about the evolution of you know, inclusion and you know, and progressive change to be like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine after a certain point and said that this feels like a time cycle for some reason. I don't know why. It's literally every 4 or 5 years, there's a major event that affects everyone. People are move towards changing it, and then there's a regression. And I could literally track like things that happened like when I started in publishing. There is this big incident. Sorry, I have to pause for 1 second here. Didn't mean to keep you holding. Hold on a second. Sorry.
Suspense. Hopefully Diana comes back.
I know one of the big
Oh,
events
it is.
that kind of like changed, well, at least surface level. I remember after George Floyd was murdered, everyone started to dedicate themselves. We're going to be more diverse. And I remember every white person I saw on social media had all these anti-racism books. And that was just a couple years ago. What happened?
Yeah.
That's why I asked, like, what happened? You know, we
Yeah.
went from I want to read anti-racism books to, well, I'm still voting for Trump. So it's like, did you read the book? What happened? You know, it's unfortunate. I keep saying it, but it's just, you know, really bad.
Okay, cool. Just a quick note. So, Diana had some IT issues, and her IT person is here to fix it. And she'll hop back in when she can. But actually, yeah, Erika, I was just about to say as well. When you bring up the example of George Floyd, because I think when Diana said it came in cycles, I think I've only experienced maybe like 1 or 2 of like the cycles, because I've only been publishing about 6 years. It's not been that long, so I haven't seen that many of them. But there's definitely, I think, as of this year, I feel like a couple years ago, like sort of like pandemic and Black Lives Matter, there was so much noise going around, and we are now at that point where I'm like, I see things are quieter again, because there's no like big tragedy to sort of make people talk about it, which is kind of terrible. And it's the same with all other issues, all other aspects like Palestine. It's like, well, it's always been there. It's just that, people are only talking about it now because a major event made. And it's kind of terrible. There's always has to be a major tragic event, usually a tragic event, that then brings a very brief amount of attention to the issue. Somto, do you have anything that you... Erika?
No, I was agreeing with you.
Somto, do you have anything you want to add on sort of like how much you have seen publishing change in the time that you have been writing, editing?
Yeah, well, I don't think I've been in the space for very long, which was really interesting when I was reading some of the essays, and I got like so much references to things that happened in the past over decades, and it was very, very informative to me because I did not have those experiences. I didn't have any of this knowledge, and just like all these aces from people from everywhere in the world just coming in, and it was really very informative. What I would say as a person who was writing from Nigeria at the time and getting published while in Nigeria, I think a lot of my people who were writing before me, they always made reference to how it was almost impossible to get published in the spaces that we were getting published in now. And that was just like, I started writing mostly in 2021, and as little as back as 2018, it was very difficult. Or like people, I had so many friends who were like, oh, back then to get published, to have your work published outside there was a lot of like tackle that came with it, a lot of struggle that came with it, especially in terms of like how getting like payments. I think even till now there's like a bit of like a payments issue because some of these payment systems do not work back home in Nigeria or like are not like allowed in the country. So there is recently a lot of magazines are taking that into consideration, and they put out different options for authors who are not writing from maybe from America or from the UK, and there are options for them to say, if you cannot use this payment system, then we are able to listen to you and know what works for you. And I think that has been a good change. Not everybody's doing that. Some people are doing it. I think more people need to also like incorporate that system into their like the way their magazine works and the way it functions. So I would say that's one of the changes I've noticed so far. Yeah.
Do you want to take the question like next? So I'll give us the question.
Yeah, I was going to just talk about like Erika, you've worked as a reviewer and an editor, and I was like curious about things. What I have also worked as an editor even before now. I worked at Android Press as an editor, and I remember that was like the first time I was working on before then I had done slush reading for short fiction magazines. So that was the first time I was going into long form work. And I remember how getting in there and the workload really, really overwhelmed me. And that was not something I think I had anticipated. And I think at the beginning of it, I really struggled with the work, but with time, I was able to like find my footing and everything. So I'm just like curious, like, did you have any notions or any misconceptions coming in? Because the misconception I had was that this is something I can do. This is something that'll be easy, and I was just like, I've read short fiction before. I can do this too. And it wasn't it was that smooth as I thought it was going to be. So I'm curious if there were any misconceptions you had or just general thoughts you had before coming to the industry. And if anything really surprised you when you like stepped in, and it could be like a good surprise, a bad surprise, like, yeah.
Okay. Well, to be clear, I have only edited indie books with indie authors and science fiction. And it's really hard, even though it was a novella, it's very hard editing. Like editing is very hard because you have to think with multiple parts of your brain. Like, and being a reviewer, you know, I'm reviewing the book in its almost final stage, right? So I'm not going back and, leaving developmental notes and things like that. I'm reviewing as it is and for the content. But with science fiction and speculative writers, it's really hard because you don't want to erase the author's voice. You want to help them and help them polish it the way you feel it would be best served for them. But it is very tough, and it simultaneously makes you a better writer at the same time, because if you're editing someone else's work, it's a little easier to edit someone's work because they've done the work already. You're just kind of going through and cleaning it up. But it has its challenges, especially when it comes to time frames and getting back revisions and things like that. As far as long form, most of my body of work is journalism. So I've only recently, literally since the beginning of the pandemic, I have been writing more fictional work. And it's definitely a different side of my brain versus journalistic work. I submitted something for the Black Immersion series. I was a runner-up for that in like 2019, and I was recently a nominee for the Ignite Awards for a comic I wrote, a space opera, a sapphic space opera. So it's definitely something new to me. I'm new with fictional writing, especially publishing it, but I regularly publish and edit cultural content. So whether it was reviewing books or reviewing art and things of that nature to a diverse audience. So that's what I do regularly. And I do it because I've always been obsessed with magazines. I feel like we deserve, as humans, we deserve magazines. Magazines are, at least to me, periodicals of history of what's happening within, the eyesight of whatever the community focus of a magazine is. And we're losing magazines. I love indie magazines. I love all types of magazines. So I started publishing my own magazine, Fabulize, roughly 10 years ago when I got out of college. And it just served the purpose, of TV shows talking from a diverse point of view, because we don't have enough diverse reviewers. We don't have enough diverse critics. You look at any movie or a TV series that comes out, and even books, you look at the Goodreads, who's reviewing them, who voices matter. And I just felt for a long time, and I still feel there's not enough voices that should be heard that are not being heard, and they're being drowned out, whether it's by the red pill community, because, there was a time with books that, there was a slew of white men bombing diverse reviewers and authors who was debuting because they didn't like the whole own voices campaign that was. And you notice now we don't really hear about own voices books anymore. Publishing stopped using that term for some reason. So yeah, again, I exist to be a disruptor. I just want to talk about books and review books and highlight books that are not popular, that are not on the TikTok table, because those are not the hidden gems. The hidden gems are the books that people aren't really reading, because I feel like publishing still wants to cater to white women specifically. And if white women don't see themselves in books, or just white people in general don't see themselves in books, they don't want to relate to the book, they don't want to read it. And that's unfortunate, because I don't feel that way. I've loved the indigenous horror and speculative fiction I've been reading lately. I have loved, the East Asian and South Asian romance, speculative fiction I've been reading. I love immersing myself in different cultures, and not just highlighting Black books, but everyone that is of a community that isn't always heard and always highlighted in mainstream media. I hope that answers the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, I love how you say like you're a disruptor, and also your sapphic space opera. I feel like this is a growing niche, and I really enjoy it. I really dig that this has become like
It is.
a thing
There's
that
not
few people
enough.
are doing.
There's not enough sapphic, at least POC and BIPOC sapphic stories, and I feel like I have not seen enough Black sapphic. I haven't seen enough Asian sapphic love stories, and I know they exist. I know they exist, but why aren't they, in the mainstream? I just keep seeing these blonde girls and, taking up all of the sapphic September, which is all blonde girls, skinny blonde girls in sapphic September. I'm like, where are the brown girls? Where are the Black girls? Like, where are the plus size girls? Where are the, androgynous? Like, where's everybody? And it's just like, they don't see themselves, and you don't see it. So it's people like me and other book influencers who focus on diverse titles. And I love partnering with Sister Sci-Fi, which is a bookstore that specializes in speculative fiction. We do graphic novel book clubs every month. We just, we try to knock and get all of the titles that might go underrated or might go under the wire, and we try to highlight them every month as much as possible.
Then I just bring you up to speed. Somto's question was about like what misconceptions or surprises you had between what you thought publishing was and what publishing actually was.
Yeah, to jump in on that, because like Diana, your essay, because when we were editing the essay, I was like, wait, did Diana write this essay for me? Because because you had like so much advice in there. And before the essay, I was like I just mentioned before you jumped in, I have worked at a book publishing like a small press before in the past, and I went in there, and it was a great place to work in. I really enjoyed working in the space. The editors were really great. Everybody, the authors were wonderful. But I think I went in there and I wasn't, I didn't think of of how this would really alter my life, because it's like this huge task to take on. And I didn't really think about it from that angle. And I went in there, and the first few months really, really overwhelmed me, and I really struggled. And your essay had like so much advice in there, like how it's okay to balance your work, it's okay to balance your life, and we are doing it for the culture, but we don't have to cave into pressure. And I think that would have been really great if I had this essay before going into that job. Yeah. So I'm also curious if when you started that as well, did things that surprised you coming into the industry, whether good things, bad things, or neutral things, really? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad you found like my very long essay informative. First of all, I just felt like, am I writing too much? Is this like is going too deep? But I'm really happy to hear that it was useful in that regard. But when thinking about the industry and also just editorial specifically, one of the things I knew coming in was that my path towards being an editor is unconventional, in any sense of the word. I never had an editorial internship. I never had to write a reader's report, until I, applied for this particular job at Tor. I, you know, but I also think that's because I had a background that was outside of the typical editorial path. It gave me a lot of insights about, one, what I thought was important as an editor coming in, and two, really understanding how the industry works on a different level than just working with the text. Seeing booksellers, and especially, I think like just working from an international perspective gave me so much. All of my booksellers, I was a point person for like 300 accounts around the world. We had a team of like 10 reps in each region of the globe, and just talking with them and hearing what they were excited about and thinking about how our reps would pitch books, not just to people from other countries, but like topics that I might not be super excited about, like business books, like how do you sell business books, or, books about different, sorts of politics, or, or books that would be really small in the US market, but be really huge in like Korea or the Philippines or Poland for some very specific cultural reason. And those were the things that our reps were looking for, because that is how they connected to booksellers. And I thought about that a lot in terms of what I would like to see like change in publishing, what I'd like to see grow in publishing, just because there are so many more readers and the audience is so much wider than where many publishers in this industry, especially like the English speaking, side of publishing, especially, in like the Western side of publishing, would think about as being like a viable readership. And so one of the things that surprised me, I guess, coming in was one, even thinking about pitching books in new ways or interesting ways that I would have never thought of as a reader, because I was always a sci-fi fantasy reader. I was mostly a fiction reader, but suddenly being asked to consider different markets in unique ways, just kind of instantly opened up my mind about like, oh, okay, so I can still get someone excited about a book that could just be about, about like the best business practices for your startup or whatever. Or I could be excited about a book because it's about Shao Kahn, which, that's actually when I was being interviewed for that job. They were like, can you pitch this book to me? And I had no idea who he was, even though he's like giant, Indian superstar. Until I was asked to do it, and I did it, and I did it so well that I got the job. You know, so just being able to put yourself in another person's perspective and what makes them excited and them looking forward to reading a book was really surprising to me. And it's something that I think had carried through like in every single job I've had since then. And it really helps as an editor, because it's your job as an editor to get the book that you're excited about, and you're the only one who's read it, and convince every single person you meet to read that book and to be as equally excited about that book. And if you can't do that as an editor, it's going to be a poor service to the project. So that was one thing that really surprised me. And another thing that surprised me is just like coming into a field that I knew it was mostly white, mostly straight, and mostly able-bodied, and just having it kind of the experience of, of like being the only person of color in the room, but then also deliberately looking for like everyone else I could connect with, that was not in the room in the first place, right? Whether it's like people at conventions. I did a whole, like, part of the reason why I got the job at Tor was not only because I had that multicultural steampunk blog, but I also was part of a performance troupe that played steampunk characters across the country. So in general, I was talking with a lot of different people. I was interacting with a lot of different types of readers and fans. And being able to speak to that, and getting them really excited about something very specific. And I'm always thinking about who is not in the room and how can I bring them into the room. And that question is, there's never one single answer. And that's the question that keeps on changing, I think.
That's really great. I think both of you talk quite a lot about, I think what I'm hearing is like these are all the opportunities and all the sort of like the people who kind of fall through the cracks of publishing, even though there are a lot of really exciting stories that can be brought to publishing, specifically kind of like Anglo-American publishing, as we are talking about the industry. That's sort of what the area that we are speaking of. And I'm thinking if we can go a bit deeper into sort of like how you think this industry can support people like this to be able to come in, as like when you're saying how can you bring people into the room, like that's just you as an editor, but sort of like how can we sort of systematically do it? And I know the immediate answer is like we should put more of these people in to the room, but sort of like how, and beyond that, how else can we sort of to make that support happen from whoever wants to start?
I can start, just by like saying the quiet part out loud is pay people. Sometimes you just have to pay people enough money that'd be worth their time and energy to do something, and that's always like that is a systemic struggle. Like no one in publishing is paid enough for the work they do for it. But it just snowballs for people that are already disadvantaged, to not be able to like, move to New York, where that used to be, not as much anymore, to get a job in publishing or to do unpaid internships, which thankfully is not the case as much anymore at all.
just to get your foot in the door. Or even, asking people to do various labor or consultation or advice, where you have a certain amount of proven experience, but ask them not, to be compensated for it. I am such a strong advocate for people to not only ask and advocate for themselves, but also figure out ways to get others paid, you know? Yeah, so one of the things that I think about a lot is the reason why I even got my first job in publishing was because when I was in undergrad, I didn't know you had to have any internships to get into publishing. And when I did, I was like, oh, okay, I guess I should get an internship. And I did, in the most unlikeliest of places. I got an internship at Kaplan Test Prep and Admissions, which is a testing company that mostly does like prep work for major exams in the United States, the SATs and the GREs. And I also got an internship at John Wiley and Sons, which is a trade publisher that specializes in business and travel books and other nonfiction, mostly. So very out of the blue. But I would never be able to take those internships even if I didn't have the money for it. And my undergrad, which is Mount Holyoke College, and I'll always name Mount Holyoke because they did this for me. For everyone who got an internship, you were able to apply for a fellowship, and the school will give you money so you can take it. So it didn't matter if you didn't have enough money to go do it yourself, or whether the internship was unpaid, because the school would sponsor you to do it. And I would think about how like rare that is for a school to do something like that. But also that was the only reason why I got like my first jobs in publishing, was because I got those internships that were sponsored basically by an institution that believed in me. And I do think about it constantly because there's so many ways where, one, you can get an unexpected, support from unlikely places, but also it's something that I wish people knew more upfront, that they could push for themselves or push to change in their own institution. So.
In my essay, I highlighted how, the pay discrepancy really hurts a lot of people who have the potential and have the desire to work in publishing and really become change makers, but the pay keeps them out. Like, even I'm a book reviewer and I still have to work other jobs because I don't get paid enough to do what I do. So that's one big hindrance. And unfortunately, a lot of people who are able to work in publishing, they usually come from a more, a higher social economy background. They're married, where they don't have to really depend on their income to live. So they are in um, different positions than other people who have the passion, who may not have those resources at their hands. So it's up to publishing. They have publishing as a whole have to either decide if they want to be more inclusive, or if they want to continue the same path of, the traditional roles that they've been doing for the past hundreds of something years. I definitely think, because the market in New York is so expensive, I think publishers should open up opportunities that are more remote friendly. It was remote friendly during the pandemic, but now that people aren't taking the pandemic as serious and people are kind of like operating kind of like before, a lot of positions I've seen, at least, are hybrid or, in person. And it's like you want people to travel into the city for $40,000 before New York City taxes. And it's like, Metro cards cost almost $200 a month. And if you only get in $40,000 a year, how are you going to pay rent? How are you going to buy food? How are you going to support yourself? You just going to have a house full of books. Are you going to be able to eat your books? What are you going to do? It's not realistic, especially in the economy that we're in right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's like within your essay, because it really reminded me of the books we published back at the press where I was working, and how we really struggle with really getting the word out there, or reaching reviewers, because it's a book by an African author living in Nigeria, and everything was set in Africa. So there was a really huge struggle with how do we get this book reviewed, who getting people to blog about the book and things like that. People in the West, and your essay really highlighted that struggle as well. And so I was really thinking, and it feels and at some point it feels oh, we're asking them to do us a favor, when we are also giving something. We're giving some sort of quality. We are adding richness to the catalog. We are bringing something new, something fresh to the table. So it's actually a two-way street, and we are doing them a favor as well, as much as they're doing us a favor as well. And I feel like that's something that needs to be emphasized on more, that we are bringing something to the table. Yeah, this is new, this is fresh, and that is what we are offering. And I feel like there's a lot more that publishers and reviewers and the industry at large, I feel there's a lot more that they're missing out on, basically. And if you're able to, are there other things you feel like the industry at large is missing out on by not looking or not reviewing diverse authors, not bringing on board more diverse reviewers, or publishing more diverse books? Yeah, I feel like there's a lot that's been missed out on. I don't know if that's something you want to talk on as well. I don't know if I passed that question across correctly.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, and this is to, I guess, to come back to my first question that I didn't fully answer before I had to step out for the IT person. But I do think there has been progress in the last, 15 odd years that I've been in publishing, but the steps can sometimes seem so incremental. For example, I remember the first big blow up that I was in publishing to experience from that side was what they called race fail 2009, 2010. You can look it up, you can research the background of that, but the point is that there were several institutions that kind of bloomed out from that, as a silver lining. One of them I remember is Two Books, which still runs to this day. It's owned by Lee and Low Publishers now, but it started off as an independent book publisher that specializes, in diverse children's books. And they sell to directly to the school and library market. They get the books right in the classroom. They've been now running for 15 years, and the publisher for that founded the company, recently stepped down because she wanted to continue to run a bookstore. So I think of that as an example of something that bloomed out of something pretty terrible. Another example is Bazarian Books, that's also run by Bill Campbell, also still running, and how that is put out, dozens of books from, all over the world and from different types of readerships. They were recently a finalist for Best Professional at the World Fantasy Award. So sometimes change can seem so incremental and slow, but sometimes the things that bloom out of it stick around, right? Another example I think about is there used to be a big book convention called Book Expo America. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was considered one of the big industry conferences where all publishers would go to promote their books. And one year for BEA, they literally had a list of guests that were all white people and a cat. It was Grumpy Cat. And they're like, so you'd rather have a cat than a person of color be a special guest at Book Expo, And people were just so incisively enraged by that idea that the organization We Need Diverse Books was formed, and they have done tremendous amount of work in terms of promoting authors, creating fellowships, creating scholarships, mentorship programs, and constantly reaching out to booksellers for innovative ways to how to market their, diverse titles in store. But that would have never started if it wasn't for this like really terrible business decision a bunch of business people in a all white C-suite made somewhere to invite a cat, to their convention. So, um, so I do think of like moments of growth where people are paying attention, and it's not necessarily like they're totally shunning the concept of reading widely or reading inclusively. But again, it's always the pushback. It's always something like the sad puppies coming around, or the rise of fascism, in many of our governments, or people who like push back, in the United States, carrying guns to school board meetings because they don't want books about queer youth in their school libraries. Like it's becoming, at times it can feel very intimidating and frightening. And I will be the first to admit that. But in counter to that, there are always people who will push back, who will fight, and will figure out some sort of way to still continue to do what they do. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually partially researching race veil in my PhD, and it was I was like, okay, I'm not surprised but still disappointed at like how new so many of the things like We Need Diverse Books are, like Cover and Society, like all these resources and support structures that came up to try and help like people who are not sort of the main part of publishing actually get into publishing. I think that's also part of the kind of the question is like, if like there are bad times, there are good times in publishing, but who has the resources to outlast the bad time in order to then sort of come back around to like the good times as well, is kind of one of those things I think about for like the arts. Anyway, Erika. Oh.
I was gonna say I actually went to New York Comic Con last week, and I know during the pandemic, BookCon was pretty much like canceled. And for the first time, I've been going to Comic Con since like 2013 as press. This was the first time in New York Comic Con that it was very literary heavy. And I mean, it was more than trust me, I didn't have a problem with it, but it was like really literary heavy. I would say out of maybe like 200 something panels throughout the 4 days, I would say only 30 was maybe comics related, and it was very romantic heavy. And while I was happy to see more books on the main floor, I was a little sad that it was overwhelmingly white, and there was a lot of authors, like white authors. I saw some promotion for Black books. I saw, Leon, which is a graphic novel with graphics, and I saw Weirdo, which was a recent release for a second, I think the second print. So I saw a few, but not enough, especially for the amount of books and how much space publishers took up at New York Comic Con. So I sometimes think about, recently there was also Scholastic was under fire for asking librarians in schools to like, put a special mark for diversity books if they didn't want it or not. That's problematic to me because I feel like publishers should be the main ones pushing diverse books and not just acquiring the books that they think will sell, because at the end of the day, it's really about money, right? Publishers want to acquire books because they want to sell the books. And if they feel like the books aren't selling, they consider it a lost cause. But at the same time, we already know that every book doesn't get the same marketing push as, their top, best books or the books they want to, feel that this is going to be the most moneymaker. So I think the marketing teams again needs to be overhauled. I think they should have like special dedicated teams to diverse titles. If they aren't willing to again be culturally competent to learn how to market certain books. I've seen book influencers on TikTok talk about, they don't know why they received these type of books. I think it was an issue with this HBCU book, and like all white reviewers received it, and they passed them to diverse reviewers so they can get a chance to it. I just feel like the publicity and the marketing for book publishing need to make a better effort, at least for the press outreach portion. And I feel like they don't really do the best at that for some reason. I don't know if is it because they don't feel like um, outlets that cater to more marginalized communities aren't worth the effort, or they don't think it's worth the traffic, or they just only want to stick to mainstream media, and they only want to land on the New York Times list. I think community focused outlets is something that book publishers are overlooking. It's those little niche communities where blogs have maybe like 5, 15, or 25,000 followers, or engaged community members who are buying the books, right? They're buying the books, but they need access to it. And now that the prices are going up on books, that's another issue. Accessibility, if you love books, I mean, of course we always want to support the library, right? But hardcovers are now $30. That's a lot of money. If people want to like buy these books and support, because we know that authors are really dependent on pre-order sales. So $30 hardcovers, $15, $20 paperback, and especially if you're dealing with young adult books, teens don't have money. They're asking their parents for the money. But if these books are going up in price, who is the audience for that? I guess that's really my thing.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. I think as both of you were speaking, and there are things that really stood out to me, like even though as the publishing industry is, if there is that lack of or not keenness towards having more diverse book or more diverse reviewers, then there are platforms that take up that space that to fill up the gap or to fill up that room. Erika, you mentioned Fire magazine, which came up as a response to publishing more writers, more Black writers across the world. And then Fire magazine also has this yearly report where they give a report of which magazines or publishing houses and percentage of Black authors they publish every year. There's also like Women on the Magazine, and then there's Strange Horizons, which does they've done like a Palestinian issue, they've done like an African issue, and then there's also Courier Magazine where Zhui also works as well. And I can remember there's the Voodoo Nuts Workshop, which is a workshop for like African authors, like for Black authors in general. And it's just, yeah, like you guys were speaking, and just really reminded me that even though there might be in the more broader industry, or in that the industry that has been there for the longest time, even though it's slow, that slowness has led to people coming in and taking up space and filling in the gaps and taking up the shoes that were like filling the shoes that were left behind, and are doing great work. And the industry has been better for diverse authors and people of color so far because of these opportunities. So in that light, I'm thinking about for newer authors or for newer editors who are coming into the scene, are there things are there form of advice you want to say to them as they're stepping in? Personally, I feel like when newer writers might come in, and then it's very likely that they might, the first contact they might run into might be a bad agent, or someone who doesn't really have their best interest at heart, and it can really lead to very ugly situations. So I'm thinking, is there like any advice you have for like newer authors, or newer people who are going into the editing process, as they're stepping into those shoes, like what should they expect? Yeah.
Yeah, well, in terms of writers and what writers could do, especially if they're newer to the space, it's all about like trying to find community. I think the heyday of social media is waning. so it might be admittedly harder to find community online than it was even like 5-6 years ago, because social media has become so decentralized and corrupted, basically. So, that, but I do think it is important for writers to find people that are fellow writers, but also non-writers that are just readers and fans that will just advocate for you and love your work. And and I'm not saying that like, you should just go jump into a virtual space or a physical space and come to people and be like, hey, you want to you want to form a community together? Like it's a slow process. It's a process of like authentic connections and not just trying to like advocate for your, and like push your own, self all the time or your own work upon others. It means genuine listening, and sharing the load. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, suddenly you have to have book talk and amass, millions of followers in order to find your community, because even that isn't really a community. It's just people that are entertained by you, right? And I think for authors, it's very important to find, people that can help protect them emotionally, because that emotional protection will also help them creatively as well. And I just see it so often now where writers are pushed, and they're stretched thin, and they have a lot of like stress and anxiety about things they can't control, right? But having the ability to control things that can feel almost impossible, but what a writer can control always: one, their own writing, their own creative output, and two, the type of relationships they form, and the type of person they are and how they, contribute to a community. And if you give back in that truly genuine way, the community gives back and they will find you. So that's what I always tell writers. The other thing I always tell writers is, do not give your writing or your content away to someone else that owns the platform. And whether it means like, oh, all those cool tweets on social media, like they're gone because Elon Musk is controlling it all, or all the videos you uploaded to like YouTube, oh, those could be, snatched away in a second. Try to, have copies, hard copies, physical digital copies of your work that you can still access. That is extremely, extremely important, and it can seem harder to get nowadays. And in turn, that also means, one, set up your own website. Don't depend on set up your own website, so when people look up your name, your website pops up. You control that. So that's just one solid, concrete example of what I mean. And for new editors coming in, I think I put a lot of advice already, in the essay. But the one thing that I didn't add that I will add now is that it is okay to have a really hard conversation with yourself and say, like, are you actually happy being where you are? And not in terms of career, but like in life, in general. Are you happy? And it's okay to leave publishing if you're not happy. There's so many people that I know that have burnt themselves out, that have like worn themselves away, that have given pieces of themselves away, for the sake of their job. And they are not happy, and they end up crashing and burning and then hurting a lot of people in the fallout, because no one knew that they had all this stuff going on. No one knew that they were so depressed or upset or struggling until it just kind of falls over like a house of cards, and it affects so many other people as a result, especially in terms of editors and authors. So the most responsible thing, if you feel like you're an editor and you're coming to that point, the most responsible thing is to take care of yourself, but also hold your responsibility to the creative and business relationships you have with those around you, and don't let those people flail because you're gone. That is the worst thing, an editor could do, if they know they can control even a tiny bit of that outcome. So, yeah.
I definitely agree with you, especially when it comes to having a website. I tell everyone, it doesn't matter if you have 100,000 followers on Instagram or 100,000 followers on TikTok. Those platforms can go away any day. And then what do? Where are you going to get your content? You can't take it back because of the platforms are gone. Even if you don't post on a website every single day, if you have your own hosting and you have your own domain, that content is going to stay there. And we're in a period where people want to take the internet archive away. We're in a period where platforms are changing every day. It's very important to have your own domain and to have a main host for your content. I'm not an editor, but as similar to you, Diana, I did not come in publishing in a traditional way. So I would say, for someone who is passionate about books and reviewing books, is to get a website. Get a website and post the books that you like to talk about. Don't be, I would say, don't use social media as a tool of what you should be reading. Read what you want, because I get a little frustrated when I open up a social media app and the same people are talking about the same book. And it's like, okay, we all reading this book, but what about all the other books that came out this month or this year? So read what you want. If you are passionate about speculative fiction or horror, read those books. Don't feel like you have to kind of keep up with the Joneses because what's popular or trending on TikTok or Instagram or anything like that. But definitely, domain is the way to start, because despite publishing marketers a little bit lax, in my opinion, on reaching out to diverse reviewers, especially independent reviewers, having a domain and you're talking about books, it can really boost up the SEO of a title. And if someone is looking for that book, even the author might Google their book and their name, and your blog can come up, right? And you never know, the author might send you a message, or they might give your information to their publicist, and then they might want to offer you a complimentary review or a future arc or something like that. So I definitely agree 100% that if you want to review books on your own time, definitely do it on a website and not a social media platform.
I think I'm very much echoing everything you all have said here, and that having, I think, in terms of like, if you want like a book community around you, if you want people who support your writing, having like a few sort of meaningful people who understand your vision and can give you feedback on that is better than like 100,000 people who are sort of following your progress but not giving you much of anything. One of the friends that I rely on most for beta reading was someone who we met in fandom in Tumblr. We started writing some like 10,000 word long like ask letters to each other on that platform. Then after that we became good friends, and I would share like manuscripts, and it had nothing to do with like networking and important events or like getting into like prestigious workshops or etc. So it's like and I think the other thing is like to be treat people kindly. It's like it's an industry that I think asks a lot of you, as any arts industry does, because it's always like a passion thing. It wants you to give a lot of yourself emotionally and psychologically, and that's the same for you and everyone else who is trying to like make it a better landscape. And it's very hard all the time, so try not to make things harder for each other. Whatever like thing is burning down, the thing I always think about when I'm doing arts projects is like we're not doing open heart surgery on an operation table, so whatever it is, it can probably like sit another day and things will be okay. So we like, if someone can't get to the phone immediately, that's fine. Like, you don't have to yell at them for it. But also at the same time, if you're a writer and your editor or your agent has like ghosted you for weeks and so, and you're getting worried about the silence, like don't be afraid to nudge them. Like as an editor, I always appreciate nudges because I work like multiple jobs. I look after like multiple people in multiple places, and sometimes like something's just like slip because I've got 500 emails in an inbox somewhere. So if you nudge me like politely, then I'll be like, oh, like I remember I might have drafted something and just forgotten to tell you, but I will then be able to respond. So yeah, that's what I have. Somto, do you have anything for anybody?
Um, I think everyone has really basically said all the good stuff that all the newer people coming in or they need to know. I think everyone has said most of what needs to be, or at least a decent amount of what needs to be known. Yeah.
I also want to ask a quick question to both Erika and Diana about like on a more individual basis. We've been talking a lot about a lot of community and like systemic stuff, but just specifically on like your working processes as like as editors, as reviewers. So like, how do you approach each story? Like sort of what do you think about as you start? Sort of what sustains you as you go through?
Yeah, in terms of process, I definitely have an evolving process. It's definitely changed since when I first started working my first editorial job to what I do now, and that's great. In general, I always think that, especially when you talk more editors or like work with different types of authors and different working styles and communication styles, it really adds to your own and be like, oh, okay. So just thinking about how people handle their creative process in general is just something to be really positive and keep in mind, and how your working style could accommodate for that, or adjustments that would need to be made so that both of you have a happy medium, I think is really important. And just being upfront and clear about that is really key. So that being said, while each book has a different creative process and journey, there's some things I always like to talk about. One is responsiveness. As I know, oh, the IT guy is waving at me. I will pause for 1 second. Sorry, but
You want me to jump in? Okay. Well, I'm not an editor, so as a reviewer, um, when I'm with Publisher Weekly, they assign me books. So it's pretty much these are the books you're gonna review, and I read them that way and review them under that scale. As a writer who is writing fiction, there's a few things I think about. I think about what am I not seeing as a reader? Like what am I not seeing that's already out there? Because I don't think anybody really wants to tell the same story unless they're like doing retellings and stuff like that. But I think about what have I not seen or what do I want to read, or maybe I might read something that might inspire me to write something. Like in my head right now, I'm playing with another space opera, sports sapphic story, right? And I'm putting that together because again, I don't see enough sapphic stories. I love space opera tales, and I love sports. Something about queer women in sports just does it for me. So that's something that's in my head, but because I don't see it a lot. Um, as a reviewer, the purpose of reviewing diverse titles is to offer insight to the reader, to the public, right? Because I'm writing the book, I'm writing the review that's portrayed that the marketing people are going to use. And there has been plenty of times where a publicist will pitch me a book, like this is a book about this, and then I read it, and I'm like, why would you comp those books for this? This is not what this book is about. I think I received the one book that was kind of like this is Good Out meets like Lovecraft Country. And I read it. I was like, this is nothing like that. And then I think about, then I have to write the review. And then once they see the review published in Publishers Weekly, then that language change. So that's how I'm helping, or at least indirectly helping that author, because what the publicist had already put together with the publisher is now changed based off the review that has been published. So I hope that has helped some authors in some way. I get happy when I see authors post my reviews on their Instagram, and I get really happy about the feedback because I know that that means a lot to them. But I know after reading that story or their book, there were things in that book I know for a fact would have been missed or overlooked had someone else that's not Black or not a person of color or someone who is not neurodivergent, someone who's not queer would have missed. So again, that's my way of contributing to the publishing industry. Um, Going forward, I hope in my future I get the opportunity to work with another production team. I do have a passion and eye for working with production teams and finding books to adapt. When I work with Steph Curry, we almost got Beasts of Prey. We almost got Black Cake. And I mean, even though it wasn't, we got beat out by Oprah. It just shows that that I have the eye for it, and I would like to have that position again because I think we need more. We need to adapt more non-white books across the board, and I hope I have that position again, or at least be in a position to do that because I think that's really important.
Diana, do you want to wrap up whatever you were saying?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if the question had changed, if I should continue the answer I had.
We are still on the same question.
So thank you again for being so accommodating for my unexpected office changes, but that's life, right? Publishing life. Anyway, the creative process is different for every book and every author that you work with, but I do think having that open conversation, knowing, on the author's end, it's, but also the editor's end too. Like we should both have the same overall creative vision. The details might be different. But I know like the hardest projects to work on are those where myself, or I see my other colleagues, they're just butting heads all the time. Butting heads, every conversation feels like a confrontation. And it's, and then the vision is off, right? And sometimes, because of work circumstances, that vision cannot be changed. Like, sometimes it can, but being willing to be open and to have a conversation about what that means in order to have the book achieve its best level of success in reaching that readership. That is the end goal, right? But I always want to make sure that communication is clear, that there's no confusion whenever possible. I like telling people dates and deadlines to turn things around. I'm very much a project manager in that aspect. I also realize too, the older I get and the more I work in publishing, the more I speak in very basic idioms and cliches. And I'm like, oh no, what's happening? And it's not that I don't have like a well-informed and well-read, perspective or way of speaking, but I also just like being straightforward. I also try to be mindful that that I don't want my own communication to be unclear, uh, that I'm not a fan, sometimes I feel like I can be a fancy talker, but other times like, no, I'm just gonna be like as, open about it as possible, and honest, right? And, um, yeah, and just like knowing that the editorial process can be complicated. It can have very unexpected things. There could be a global pandemic. Your books could fall into the sea. Governments could collapse. Like the most extreme things happen in real life. And that always comes in to the work process. You can't wall it away. To wall it away completely is to be inauthentic and like untruthful to what is happening in other people's lives. Um, you know, uh, uh, and ultimately we're here to create art, and art can be a complicated, imperfect process, but it should at least be enjoyable, right? And as I mentioned in my essay, you can't predict how well your book will be received or sell, but if the bookmaking process brings you those 100 moments of joy with another person or another reader or another book lover, then that is what it matters to you in the end. That was what should, matter the most when other things can feel so uncontrollable and anxiety filling. So.
Yeah, thanks. Just as I'm just keeping an eye on time as we are starting to wind down. If audience have any questions, please put it in the chat, and Sifa will ferry it over to us. Nisi actually had a few questions for us in the chat, which I'm going to hopefully string together. Asking that the Carl Brandon Society is currently does do diverse book fairs. I don't know about this because I'm not based in the US. And is asking, can we do more of these? Can we kickstart things like book buying funds, supplemental funds to pay interns of color? How would this work, and what other things can be done?
Mm-hmm.
I hope I presented your question correctly, Nisi.
Yeah. Just basically the idea is let's throw money at these problems. And the book fairs are like the scholastic book fairs, but so they're for children. Mm-hmm. But if I remember correctly from the last one, every child who attends gets one free book of their choice. So that's another way of like, here, have some books, have some money.
That doesn't happen now. That doesn't happen now. My daughter has a book fair next week, and you have to give kids at least $25, $30 these days because the books prices they're giving it's just retail prices. I thought the books would be like $5 or $10. The books are like $10, $15 a piece, and this is my daughter's only in kindergarten.
Yeah, so this model, I'm sorry to horn in here, but this model is the organizer buys all the books wholesale, and then they give one away for every person who comes to the fair. So it's happened at least twice, and there's going to be another one in Indiana, but these are like, 2 a year or something. There need to be more, right? There need to be more not in the US. Am I right, Trini?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think we have like giving away books here, but I do know there are certain initiatives like the Book Fairy initiative where people hide a book in sort of like a specified location, and then you can discover the book and then it will be yours, which is like a really cute kind of like a tooth fairy concept but with books that is run by like a few people here at various locations around the UK.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in terms of like, where can the money come from? That's always the big question. And there are ways, I think, that people are thinking about crowdfunding or donating or, putting up a free little library in their neighborhood if you have that program, or community book swaps. I think there are ways that people are trying that are very localized. And I think that, and I would encourage that. It's really hard to have a whole huge initiative, to be plopped in and be like, let's all do this together. It's like when that happens, that's great. I'm a strong believer in the snowball effect. That you could have something that starts off really small or really like a really intimate target, community, and just having other people pick it up along the way. They're like, oh, I saw someone do this, at my school, I'm going to go see if like other schools would like to do something similar. Or, my local coffee shop has, a silent reading club. And that only started because I started going there and reading, and then I brought a couple friends, and then we all just started reading. And then the other people saw us and started to have a conversation, there I think there are ways that people can contribute to change that can manifest in different ways. And as much as we talked about money in this conversation, and as big as money has been, it doesn't always have to be a solution. I think the ultimate solution is about engagement. It's about community engagement. It's about emotional engagement. It's about interpersonal engagement. And that is how you can create things and abilities for people to step up and realize, their actions that may seem very singular can be still very impactful, especially with something like books. You know, and it could come in so many different ways, whether it's like writing to your local politician to support your library and library funding, whether it is, being more civically minded, and aware of what your representatives are talking about, whether it's showing up to your school board meetings that no one ever goes to, but just to talk about the books. Whether it's to just have a small open chat like every month with your favorite writer friends, and then they invite their favorite writer friends, and then they invite their favorite writer friends. There are a lot of interesting ways that people are just connecting over books, and I do overall feel hopeful that people will continue to pursue those ways and pursue new ways of getting access to reading. And I think that is the key thing here, is that how can you create new inroads for access?
Probably last point of the evening. Erika, you have something to add?
Oh no, I was just saying thank you. Thank you for including me. Thank you.
Actually, that's actually like a really good point to end on. So on the last 3 minutes, maybe let's just go around and say where can people find you in this sort of like failing social media landscape, and and any last thoughts?
Last thoughts. I have ADHD, so I don't have a process. I'm very chaotic, so I apologize to everybody I work with up front. But you can find me online, fabulizemag.com. That's FABULIZEMAG.com. I am available for essays, whether it's nonfiction or fictional essays. You can always contact me at Erica@fabulizemag.com. I'm fabulizemag everywhere on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, wherever. Everything is at fabulizemag. So thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored to be here with these excellent writers. Oh my God.
Yeah, and I want to thank everyone here too in the panel for having such really great, insightful answers, for all the deep thoughts, and you can find me. My website is just my name, DianaMPho.com. My company is called Erewhon Books, which is also erewhonbooks.com. We are currently upgrading our website, so if you look at it immediately now, you will not see it, but it will show up shortly. And that is when you can find it in general. Our parent company is Kensington Books, so you can also look up our Erewhon catalog through their website as well. So that's just kensingtonbooks.com. On social media, I do have an Instagram. Again, it's just my name, diana.m.pho. You can also find me on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn, on Threads. I don't have a TikTok.
No worries. Thank you everyone for that. And if you want to read everyone's essays on Publishing Taught Me, you can find it on the SFWA blog. And thanks everyone for listening tonight.
Great.
I hope we had
Thank you.
Great.